How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the Deep Thought. My name's Hasib, and let's get into today's topic. And today's topic is going to be a little controversial, of course. Some people are going to agree, some people are going to disagree, but today's topic of discussion is going to be on the concept of God. And we're going to touch on the two very popular beliefs of the concepts or the conception of God. The first, which is going to be the religious, the one that comes from the religious texts that we've written, and the second that's going to come from the scientific study of the existence of God. Now, I want to start off with the religious texts that we've created and manifested the concept of God into, and how it and what that is. So first and foremost, let's start off by stating that we're obviously taught from a very young age that there is an authoritarian father in the clouds with a white beard that essentially looks like we do, all of us, and is up there, is constantly watching us, always monitoring us. And from a very young age, we're taught that this so-called being is, there at all times, forever and always, and it's the way we've written in religious texts. The concept of God is an being that is infinite, that is all-powerful, that is all-knowing, all-seeing. We've given him a personification as well, because when I refer to the idea of God, sometimes you will notice that I say he, she, it. But this is what we've done. We've created this concept of God that is, as we know today, in the religious sense, the ultimate being of existence, the ultimate creator of everything that is in existence today. And in the religious texts, we make it out that he, she, it is watching us and keeping us essentially, in a way, imprisoned within, our own existence. Because obviously, if you're being watched, if you're being monitored, if your actions are being watched at all times, you are obviously under a gaze of something or someone, and that's what the so-called Father is embedded into our heads when we are taught about God. This is coming from the religious text. This is what we learn from the religious text. This is what God does. So he's constantly watching us like we're a released prisoner from his gaze, its gaze, because this thing just has an infinite number of souls that it has to throw out and release into existence, and it watches it until it has its experience, until the authoritarian father believes that it has had its run and is ready to take it back. This is the way that we have defined God in religion. We define him as an authoritarian, a tyrannical being that is constantly watching us, that is watching our every move, and that has given us the text to essentially live our lives in a certain way, to a certain method, to a certain in a certain way in our societies. Now that's the religious way of seeing the authoritarian father. So in the religious text, we just make him out to be an all-powerful being that is infinite and is constantly watching us. Now, when we refer to God, and I am going to go into the scientific idea or conception of God, when we look at God from a scientific standpoint, we have now created the essence of God and the belief of God in the form of energy. And a lot of people who are religious and don't actually understand the concept of energy won't necessarily understand this, but the way that the scientific community conceptualizes the idea of God is through the form of energy, down to the very smallest particle that we can possibly think of or imagine. And right now, as of right now, the smallest particle that we have and that we can possibly imagine is, I believe, still the atom. And if there is something smaller, then that is where we are at. Because we believe that those pieces, those itty-bitty pieces in the universe are the things that create everything. And in a sense, they're right, because, without those itty-bitty pieces jumbling around together, vibrating at a certain frequency, at a certain place, at a certain time, things wouldn't exist the way that they do. But you see, they still believe in a form of God. Some people don't. Some people deny that description is the description of God. But in a way, it truly is the definition, the scientific definition of God. In the scientific view now, the reason that a lot of people will deny the word itself is because they don't like the connotation behind the religious texts that have put the meaning behind it as well. So when a scientist hears the word God, they don't like to hear that in a sense of a man who has a white beard, white hair, older than the universe itself, sitting up the clouds, staring down at us. So of course, a lot of scientists are going to be against this type of ideology, or against that phrasing of the interpretation of God, of the ultimate being. So let's take a look at how both ways have essentially impacted our societies, how both ways have affected our societies and shaped it into what it is today. So the religious text, let's start off with the religious text and talk about how that has shaped our society. When I talk about the religious text version of God, if you go back earlier in the video, you'll recall that he is an authoritative figurehead. He is a godhead that is essentially watching you at all times and doesn't let anything go by without him, she, it noticing. And if you go against the grain, if you go against the idea of this God, the concept of this God, you will be punished. You will be hurt in some form or fashion. You will essentially be punished through karma, action. Now we can discuss the meaning of karma. Karma means action. It doesn't actually have a negative or a positive connotation behind it. When we talk about karma, especially here in the Western world now, we always or usually have a negative connotation behind it. So we hope that something negative, a negative action, happens to somebody when we tell them, I hope karma gets you. So we hope that a negative action happens to the person that we are telling that to. But when we talk about God in the religious text and what the concept has done in our society, from the religious text point of view, it has really taken our society and created a culture of fear. Now, this isn't going to go, this isn't a knock on the idea of God. This is the reality of the conception of God that we have created today. And that is a fear-based conception. When you think about God, when you think about doing anything that is in your moral compass wrong, that probably comes from the basis of understanding religion and God in some form or fashion to some degree. So you're afraid to do things. You're afraid to do. You're afraid to hurt somebody. You're afraid to hurt someone's feelings. You're afraid of confrontation. You're afraid of all these things, and that all comes from the idea of the authoritarian father that essentially has created the culture that we see today in today's society. So when we operate under the guise of fear of God, we are afraid to be ourselves. We are afraid to behave truly like we actually are. We don't allow ourselves to experience ourselves. We don't allow ourselves to experience our emotions at the full ranges that they go. Like when you get upset, people try to restrain themselves. People try to hold back the sadness, the anger, all these things, because they believe that they will, in some form or fashion, upset God. And if you're going to think about God and the concept of the religious text, you don't want to upset the guy that is up on the clouds watching you 24/7. If you're looking at it from a perspective of the science, you understand that if you project a certain frequency into the universe itself, it will come back and reflect itself upon you. But of course, that's getting into the scientific bit, and we'll get into that here in a few minutes. But the religious text, as we can see today, the religious text paints the picture of God in such a way that we are terrified of the authoritarian father, of the father of existence, of all creation, of everything, because it is painted in such a way that it makes you feel like you can't do anything. It makes you believe that if you go against the grain of society, if you go against everything that society stands for, all the rules, all the regulations that we have in place, if you go against them, that you are a horrible human being. This is the setup that we have, that religion has created inside of the minds of people. Now, there's two things that happen to people when they are under this guise. One, you're either going to be obedient, which a lot of people are. You're going to be obedient to the rules, to the regulations, or you're going to act out. And we all have seen what happens when people act out when they feel essentially trapped, and it's not pretty. We see people harm each other. We see people harm one another all the time because of this. Now, that is the understanding of God from the religious text's view. So let's get into the scientific stance. Let's get into the scientific stance and look at it from the scientific standpoint. Now, from a scientific standpoint, the concept of God, of course, if you go back into the video, you will hear me talk about how scientists believe that he is the form of energy, every form of energy within the universe itself. And if you understand the concepts of your thoughts create things in a way that's true, because your mind communicates with the universe itself, down to the very core, down to the very essence of everything. Your mind communicates with everything. So when people talk about wanting something or doing something that they're extremely passionate about, and they set their mind to it, they set their mind to achieve it with no obstacle in their path, they send out a frequency into the universe, and essentially with that frequency something comes back. Either that be success in achieving the goal that they set out to accomplish, or something else. So this aspect of God is also, in a way, people look at this concept of God as very benign and dead, and people don't like it. But this is the conception of God from the scientific standpoint. We don't believe that there is anything in existence. We don't believe that there is a higher being. We don't believe that there is anything in existence that is greater than anything else that is already in existence. So when you put it this way, you also think about the idea of God not necessarily existing from a place of, being up in the clouds or just being around you. You also look at it from the perspective of God, in essence, being you and everybody else and everything else that exists in the universe. Down to the energetic level, of course. Down to the level of every frequency, the smallest wave, the smallest particle is in a sense God. And this is what the scientific community thinks about the essence of God. They believe that it is essentially nothing but energy. Now, both of these ideas, both of these ways of thinking are fairly, they're both ways that you can think about the existence of God. You can think is essentially the true nature of existence. Now, one is obviously fear-based. So one is control, and it terrifies you into being nothing but a poor little me. And the second does the same. When we really think about it down to the very core, the religious text and the scientific basis of the concept of God, both concepts are essentially there in a way to deprecate or to put down the human being. These are both methods used, and I'm even putting the scientific community out there. Even the scientific community uses this form to control people. Because when you tell somebody there's nothing really out there and that you are it, people get depressed. People don't necessarily process that very well, and they look to find meaning in something else. So the scientific community uses this fear just as much as the religious conception of God as a form of control. So you see God, in a sense, in both, in any sense that you put the idea of God, can be turned into a form of control and manipulation. Now, you can also take it the other way, and religiously, in religious texts, you can also say that this is another way of teaching God, is that God is there to help you. God is there to illuminate the path that you are taking within your life. This is coming from the religious text. This is from a different way of interpretation. This is how other people interpret the concept of God. Because we went through the control, the manipulative, the fear-based concept of God from not only the religious text, but also the scientific basis, the scientific ideology of God, and how they're both very, they can both be very fearful and very fear-based. They can be used to manipulate and to deprecate, to put you down, to make you feel like you are nothing but a sack of pus and blood with some bones rattling around. As one of my favorite philosophers, Alan Watson, put it. But you see, there's also a way that you can. There's also a way that can be positive, that can also shine a positive light in the idea, the concept of God. And coming from the religious perspective, they say, oh, this is God is here for you, or essentially he is everything, or she is everything, it is everything, that it's here for you, it's here to help you illuminate the path and guide you through it. Now that's one way of looking at it. That's another way of looking at it, but that's not the popularized way of looking at it within our society. The popularized way is the fear, the control, because we like to have control, because it makes us believe that we have some sort of stability. So instead of telling people, hey, you know what, there's this great thing that is always going to be with you, that you are it, that you are going to be just fine, we tell people, hey, you know what, don't believe any of that stuff. It's no good. Just stick with us. Give us the money that you make, every Sunday. That's it. Now, when I also talk about this concept, I'm also talking about the other religious texts, okay? This isn't just for Christianity. This is for Islam. This is for the Jewish religions. All these religions have these have this in them in one form or another, or they can be perverted into these concepts or misconceptions of God. So God can be a very powerful thing from the religious text as well, because we can use it in a positive light to perpetuate love and essentially a culture of care. We can do the same within the scientific community. When we talk about God in the scientific community, there is, of course, the very popular belief that, you know, it is nothing but, and that you are nothing but. We put it down. We put the idea of God down. We put ourselves down as well, because when we think about it, we think about, oh well, I'm just nothing in this existence, nothing in the universe. When it's quite the contrary, and you are the very essence of everything. When you really think about the basis of existence, the very things that we need to survive and exist, just to exist, because we are made of the fundamental elements that are used for virtually any form of existence that we know of, and that is, I believe that is carbon, methane, oxygen, hydrogen, and these are the chemicals, the compounds that we are made of, our being, our very essence, and that's what the universe is made of. That's what the majority of the universe that we are looking into, we are studying right now. We are essentially concluding that the majority of the universe is created from the things that we are made of. So therefore, in a scientific sense, the idea of God from the scientific community, of God being everything and everyone down to the smallest particle, is not only true, but also very uplifting, because in a sense, you are the manifestation of the creator of everything in existence. And so am I. And so is everybody else. And it's such a beautiful way to look at the world, because then you can look into somebody's eyes and you can see yourself in their eyes. And that is my concept. That is my understanding of the concepts of God that we've created. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Give me a like, let me know in the comment section what you guys thought. Let's have a discussion. I want to have a discussion. This is one of my favorite subjects to talk about. So I hope you guys have yourselves a fantastic day, and I will see you guys again in the next video. Enjoy, share with your friends, let them know. Let's have a conversation. Bye, guys.